Oxford Street.
live in Hackney.
East London. Yeah.
We both live in Hackney.
Yeah.
I live in Leicester. Yeah, the champions. Yes. I live in Shoreditch.
I live in Sydney.
Currently we live in Dalston.
Not so great at the moment, given the Brexit, but yeah, I'm not feeling too patriotic at the moment.
I love Britain. I'm Australian and I've just moved here.
I feel positive about Britain. I think it's a great place to be. It's a great place to live. It's multicultural. It's tolerant. It's got everything. I like it. Yeah, it's good.
I feel very proud to be in Britain and be part of Britain for such a small island. Many people will not agree with me. For such a small island, if you look at the history of the empire, it's massive. It's massive. Such a small place once did run the world. The sun was not setting on the British Empire, not setting at all. So I'm proud.
Well, I mean, it's also politically charged at the moment, isn't it? You can't say that's why you're doing this.
As of Britain now, I think there are lots of things which I really admire in the sense of I think it's quite fair and people have a certain, or I feel I have a freedom of life here, and I get to do things and explore various avenues, be it work-wise or hobbies, and that's what I really enjoy. I like the fact that London is a big melting pot and I get to encounter various other people who I wouldn't unless perhaps I visited their country. So that's one thing which I really like about Britain. And in terms of things where perhaps there's scope of improvement, would be other than the weather. I guess there are certain things I'll kind of come to it when it comes to it.
It means to me that we had quite a lot of colonies quite a long time ago, and kind of times have changed now and we're a lot smaller.
I guess the British Empire historically is the Queen's monarchy and the whole range of empires that they had, like for example Australia is a colony and so was India at a point in time as well.
Well, I don't think there is a British Empire anymore. There's a Commonwealth. The British Empire is just, well, we haven't had an empire since the end of the Second World War, effectively. So I don't think there is an empire.
But there's a lot of things which are the legacy of what was the British Empire.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah, but we haven't got an empire anymore. We're not.
The British Empire, to me, it means that it doesn't matter your size. It's all about determination. It's all about how you can change the world. Because, all right, I'm a Christian. I'm going to take my Christian point on this. The expansion of the empire, it looked like it was just to make a name for Britain. But it turned a lot of people's minds towards what they believed and some of the cultures. They were believing in some weird things and they brought Christianity to a lot of people. It did spread the message. Although Britain did gain some other things, not just religiously, but to me, I like it because it did spread the gospel. So that's how I love it.
For me, it conjures up power.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the ultimate empire, right? After the Roman Empire, British Empire means, unfortunately, colonization and, you know, countries that you have control over that don't border yourself, you know?
It was the stretch of culture, the stretch of sort of a certain type of culture at the expense of others.
It also means all-encompassing.
Yeah, I mean, no, it has unparalleled influence. It has had unparalleled influence since, well, at least until America. At which point you say America is born of this British
Of the empire, so, yeah.
I come from India, which was a former colony, and the British were there for 400 years. The interesting thing is about how they built up the colony from nothing, and you know there was a huge, long period over which they sort of ruled the country. There were a lot of good things which were done, but you do feel that it was somewhere it was fundamentally not right, because it was about, you know, being in a country for a long period of time, and there were things which we were left with which was not good post-independence, and it took a long time to sort of, you know, start sort of getting our own feel and ability to govern the place. But again, there were a lot of good things which was done by the British Empire in India. So
Coming
a
from
bit of
this
plus and minus.
same point, being from Calcutta, which used to be the head of the British Empire, we kind of grew up, some of us, being a bit of an Anglophile, liking certain things. However, one of the things which I really kind of think that the whole subcontinental region kind of suffers from and has its roots in the colonial power is the divide and rule, be it dividing, Bengal in 1905, and then, this whole Muslim-Hindu kind of a problem which we are struggling with even now. Of course, one would say one has been independent for over so many years, and why we haven't been able to resolve it. And so it's not so binary as it was their fault and therefore, but that's where the seeds were sown.
I think that I see us as like one of the first like major like colonists in like the 19th, 20th century. But I wouldn't, yeah, as I said, I don't feel like that. I feel like that's quite a long time ago now.
They've influenced it culturally, food-wise. A whole range of other nations are influenced by like British cuisine, for example, British culture. So I think like Britain's been a big part of the world.
Well, massively, culturally, economically, from an engineering point of view, massive. The Industrial Revolution started in the UK, in Birmingham, and it went all over the world. So, yeah, massive influence. The railways in India, everything. That's all the legacy of the British Empire. Plus all the administration and bureaucracy, democracy. It all stems from that.
But also a lot of things, and particularly a lot of countries in Africa, I think lots of where countries have got problems now are a legacy of the empire and the end of the empire, and the kind of, when you go, you cut your losses and go, and don't actually stop and think about the consequences for the people who are there. And I think people don't think about that. People take very simplistic views of countries left to themselves and don't take into account the couple of hundred years before then when they didn't have a chance to be themselves, really.
Yeah.
You go to anywhere in the world today, you go to France, although it's one of the international languages, you find people speaking English. The Queen's English is all over the world. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I grew up speaking English, television, road signs, everything. It changed the way people thought. The education system is all over the world. Engineering is all over the world. It's absolutely shaped the whole world. People can talk about America is a strong power, but then all those people that are there, they are descendants of the empire. You can talk about how big Australia is. Those are descendants of the empire. So, what would the best way actually to think about it is how would the world look without the British Empire? I think it would be a dark place.
I mean, what is quite impressive is for a country which is sort of a very, very small part on the world map, the level of influence it has in the world, and not just because of the language English, is quite phenomenal. I don't think enough modern people probably think and reflect on the past British history and what got them to where they are today. And we are obviously standing on the post Brexit, and we are in a brave new world. But there is something about, I think people need to read more history and understand the good things about it, because some of it is probably lost.
I think we all need to know a little bit more about the history. The way, say, Africa was carved up. I think there are a lot of problems that were created there. I just feel that we don't know enough, or we don't bother to know enough about history. And I think somehow that's important. Otherwise, there's a saying which says, those who forget their past are condemned to repeat it. So I think that's where the cycle tends to happen.
I don't think I see too much of a link. I think that lots of the talk about making Britain great again maybe was harking back to when we were, you know, a major power. But I don't see a link between immigration and the British Empire.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there are, like the visa I came on a Tier 5 visa, which is applicable to colonies of the British Empire. So because of that relationship that Australia held with the British Empire, I was able to come over here. So of course that's got to do with immigration.
Well, yeah, there's obviously still immigration from what was formerly the British Empire into the UK, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Oh man, I've been waiting to say something about this for a very long time. I think a lot of people are not satisfied with immigration as it happens now, but they forget that as the empire grew long time ago, the empire made people that were British to go to other countries, and in those times there were no passports. You could just go there and do whatever you want. Now, on the reverse, people are coming in here, and I think it should be embraced, and people that are part of the empire should be happy, saying, well, we are creating a world where there is harmony between all different people. When they went to all other countries, they were received, although not very much so, but then I think it's a reverse from what happened. Most of the people that have come to this country, they were part of that British Empire. So it's got a link to it. You can't separate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, but like Britain went went off into the world and extolled its virtues. It's common sense that that would go the other way. That if you go somewhere, people would be enamored with what you take and want that back in return. So of course, people have been exposed to British culture. People have become interested in British culture and want to experience that for themselves. Like want to come here.
I think there's one thing to have a responsibility if you conquer other nations, that those people in which you've sort of ruled over have a right to be a part of your country. But I think the issue now is you have immigrants who are complete separate entities that have never been ruled by Britain. And that's another question, is who has the right to actually come into your country?
Yeah, but at the same time, Britain, went off and colonized the world, and now wants to turn its back on reverse colonization. So it's now decided that it doesn't want to be a part of the world that it helped create.
I don't think the linkage is necessarily between the British Empire and immigration, but naturally now, because of Britain's place in the world, a lot of people have come here. But we need to think about immigration differently, I think.
And also, I think there was a point of time in the 50s and 60s where there was a requirement here. You needed your bus drivers, your conductors, your grocery store owners, etc., etc., etc. Otherwise, the economy wouldn't run, and they were attracted.
But you know about them.
Yeah. It's a really delicate topic to talk about.
I don't think I know much about it, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, I've heard stories about it, but that's as far as my knowledge of it goes.
I know that we kind of invented the concentration camp, and then it was used in like greater. It was used like more in the Second World War. And I know that in the 50s there was the Mau Mau rebellion was like an uprising against the British Empire in Kenya, and it was quite a big thing in Parliament. But it's not talked about enough, and it just shows that like even after the Second World War, the British Empire was still pretty bad and brutal in its uses.
No, I've never heard of it.
I wasn't taught at school, but I've read about it since. I mean, I'm aware of those things, yeah.
Well, the history I did included the end of the British Empire and all of that, and although we didn't do every bit in a lot of detail, we certainly did talk about things like partition of India, and I think people don't now. I think it probably is missed out in a bit between history and the very modern punk rock and the Gulf War kind of history, and a lot of really important stuff, isn't there?
I was taught about those when I was at school. I was brought up in Zimbabwe, so part of my history lessons, I remember Mama. I can't tell you much about it, but I remember about the Mau Mau. I remember Mau Mau. I remember we learned everything. Industrialization. Our history was packed with everything from around the world. I think what we are suffering from here, whereby we're not really being taught about the empire, the British Empire in England. You go to Zimbabwe, our history, when we look at it, most of it starts in slavery. Whereas we have a history beyond slavery, so we're not being taught. So some conspiracy theories may end up coming up. Okay, why are we not really being taught about what we should not be ashamed about where we're coming from? So I think the history, there's something that needs to happen here with what we're being taught at school all over the world. It's not just for the empire, it's everywhere.
I mean, I've heard of the amateur. I'm not. I'm assuming, what are we talking about here? We're talking about your local people, taking up arms against.
Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, what?
So
and then I'll give you an
So
opinion.
the Amritsar massacre, right?
Yeah.
It was in 1919.
Yeah.
Peaceful protesters defied a government order, this is in India, and demonstrated against British colonial rule in Amritsar. They were blocked inside the walled Jallianwala Gardens and fired upon by Gurkha soldiers. The soldiers kept firing until they ran out of ammunition, killing between 379 and 1,000 protesters and injuring another 1,100 within 10 minutes. Brigadier Dyer, who was giving the orders, was later lauded a hero by the British public, who raised £26,000 for him as a thank you.
I mean, it's a sign of society in turmoil.
I just question how one learns about that. I mean, is that
We don't.
sort of a footnote in history that's swept aside, or is it a part of history books in the curriculum? Well, I mean, that's significant.
But I think about how that was recorded in Britain at the time, because I'm certain that it would have been presented as you say, as sort of like a great heroic moment in Britain's history. And it's much easier to just say, we subdued the local barbarians, and now all is right because Britain's in charge again.
But it's interesting, I've never heard of those battles.
Well, it came to light last year that the British government had destroyed lots of documents, particularly about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, and it was only through this journalist's work and interviewing thousands of victims' families that
it came to light.
I think by and large, Britain has a long way to go in terms of taking responsibility for actions that it's taken across the world in the pursuit of colonialization. I mean, the fact is, if you go to the Imperial War Museum, there's still parts of, there's still writing on the walls that talks about sort of the glory of the British Empire, and it's just not how we should be talking about it. We need to accept it for what it was. Yes, it did bring a lot of good to the world, but it wreaked a lot of havoc, and it really upset a lot of order across the world.
I think it kind of depends on I think it depends on how they left, because I think the Indians maybe see it in a more positive, romantic light, but I think that maybe Iraq or Palestine don't really see it in quite as favourable light. And I think the Indians maybe should see it in less favourable light.
I think it varies. For example, Australia is still a colony, and there are some people that you ask and they love the Queen, and there are other people that think we should be a republic. Whereas, for example, if you asked India, they think that it potentially wasn't the best move for them. And I guess some of the colonies would have varying views depending on what happened at the time.
I think there's a real mixture, isn't there? Every time they do things and they show the Queen's birthday or something, and they show people in former colonies looking very proud and more proud than we are, as quite often a lot of the time. But I mean, with real mixed things, so the bits which are there, which are part of their history, because there was a history of celebrating being part of the empire, but also a lot of ways in which, as I said, it hasn't given them a chance to be themselves, really, and living with the legacy of that.
I think former colonies are quite proud that they were part of that they were part of the British Empire, and they still feel that they are part of it. You go to a place like Zimbabwe, for instance. Some of the places have been the president has ordered that the names be changed to local languages. But then you still go to Victoria Falls, which is named after the great Queen Victoria. You go to Australia, you go to each and every continent. There is all the colonies have still got something that is tied to the British Empire.
I just wonder whether they actually feel there is a responsibility that that England has to their economies and to their institutions, that they support them. Ghana and India specifically, I think, are very different. I think India would not, but I think
I don't know. I still think there's a part of the former colonies that we tend to sort of fetishize the British Empire or sort of Britain, in the sense that it's something that used to have this great power over us, and we still culturally sort of immediately turn towards it for a point of reference, and that's changing. And I think certainly in Australia and America, as much the point of reference as Britain is, and India certainly I'd say the same.
I think former colonies are beginning to see their own values and their own power and their own autonomy, and value that probably more than being a surviving off.
No one wants to define themselves as a country that was taken over. You want to have your own identity. It's become increasingly clear to me that that Australia shouldn't have any sort of political ties to Britain. Like, it is ridiculous that in 2016 the Australian head of state lives in a palace halfway across the world. We have a rotating seat on the UN Security Council, and we can't be, we can't trust ourselves to have our own head of state. Are you kidding? Like, it's time for Britain wants to, shut itself off from the world. Let it. Australia. It's time for us to sort of forge a new path. I'm very passionate about that.
I completely disagree, but that's
what?
I just don't think.
What, you think Britain should?
I don't think the institution of the monarchy and the head of state in England has much impact on our daily lives in Australia anyway, so I don't really have a problem with it, and I think it's...
Oh, but that's completely the wrong attitude.
Okay, alright.
No, I'm sorry, but it is, at the end of the day, it's still a part of who we are, that we ultimately answer to the Queen across the world.
And I think you just said it, ultimately, it's a part of who you are, it's your history, and it's a...
Exactly, but it's not, I don't think that in 2016, as an Australian, I should have to say that my head of state is English. Like, it should be.
I don't think it's broken.
Would you want it for America? Would you happily sign yourself into that?
Well, America did not. America's independence has been hundreds of years, not...
Well, I mean, what did I say, like, if not yesterday, today. Like, today is as good a day as any to start a new period of independence for Australia.
Past glory. Past and current, people still believe it.
I don't
People still believe it. People still believe in the whole sort of, like, monarchy, like, proud of that. But
that's British people who believe in that, not really the rest of the world.
Racist.
I guess it's sort of the colonialism of the world.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that would apply to an older generation than me. They've probably still got that legacy. People that have been through probably the Second World War and saw the decline of the empire. I think the older generations probably still have that mentality. They still think when we had an empire. But I don't think that's applicable to, certainly to younger generations.
But I think that a lot of things, there's a lot of it still there, and kind of, what's the words I want to say? It's kind of hardwired into, if not into people, into a kind of collective culture in some ways. And a lot of this Brexit stuff has kind of reignited all of that. And, a lot of people have talked about wanting Britain to be like it was in the 1950s. Well, even that, what was going on in the 1950s, lots of it changed in the British Empire.
I was going to say something, but I was going to say control, but it's not really just about control. All right, when I say British Empire, the first thing that will come to my mind is about changing the world for the better. Yeah, changing the world for the better. The reason why I say so is, if I can say that, is when the empire went to places like Africa. For instance, my tribe, we used to sacrifice animals, we used to worship ancestral spirits, We used to mix blood and cow dung together and washing it, thinking that that will bring us good luck. And then someone comes, although they are after your gold, but then they are saying, okay, I've got this religion that is better, it will connect you to where you come from. I think it's a better thing. We moved away from those things and started to worship the Lord Jesus without having to make sacrifices, and I think that changed the world for the better.
Dominance.
Power. British Empire state of mind.
Entitlement. This notion that the British way of life, British society
It's that word empire.
better.
You know, it's that whole the setting sun, the sun never sets in British Empire. The moment you say that word, it charges everything.
I don't think it exists, but I think it's important that the current generations of the people, all of us as global citizens, need to know what it was about, because it did exist at a point of time. And it started with commerce, thereafter it became, well, a country, and it started with the East India Company, again coming from the Indian context, went to trade as well as found a huge market. Apparently what India was for Britain in those days, as providing resources as well as being a market to kind of buy the end products, is what inspired Hitler to attack Russia. So it was a powerful concept.
For me, I think two words: enterprise in the first place, but followed by entitlement. And the second part, I think parts of it is unfortunate. But it was firstly about enterprise and the ability that to be able to rule many parts of the world, being a very small nation, is truly something. There's something quite remarkable about it.
What is important is to know what were the pluses and minuses about it, and I just find a lot of people, even from my country, are not totally aware of their own history, and that's what is a little worrying.